Kubrick's Universe, Episode 7, Adam Rackoff. A real one.
Our highly skilled team are focused on bringing you the optimal experience.
So many answers we may never know. Too many questions, get on with the show. No time for the chorus, only this verse. It's Kubrick's
Open the podcast doors, Hal.
It's Kubrick's Universe, the Stanley Kubrick podcast.
What was Stanley like? If you knew Stanley, you'd understand why it's hard to talk about him. If you knew him, you'd appreciate the art of keeping your cards close to your chest, or how a game of chess can tell you more about a guy than he can about himself. Was he a genius? How would I know? But what I can say is that Kubrick, in every sense and in every definition of the word, was an artist. No question about that. He lived and breathed his art. What you don't know is that art included his family, his pets, his home, and his friends. Kind of in that order. Welcome to Full Metal Jacket Diary.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Brand new episode of Kubrick's Universe for you. Thanks for tuning in. At the boards is our resident bon vivant and a guy who's just as cool as the other side of the pillow. I'm referring, of course, to our producer, Stephen Rigg. I am your host and humble narrator, Jason Furlong. We've got a cool show for you today. We have, as a guest, Mr. Adam Rackoff. Now, Adam is a New York-based filmmaker with numerous credits, including 27 as producer alone. He's worked on feature films, shorts, documentaries, even a video game. But he is best known among Kubrick fans for his collaborations with Matthew Modine on the Full Metal Jacket Diary iPad app, and later the Full Metal Jacket Diary Audiobook. Adam met Matthew when Matthew came into the Apple store where Adam was working as part of his Made on a Mac series. This is eventually what led to the Full Metal Jacket Diary app. Now, Wikipedia defines a killer app as any computer program that is so necessary or desirable that it proves the core value of some larger technology, such as computer hardware, a gaming console, a software platform, or an operating system. An example would be Lotus 123 for the PC back in the 1980s. Now, Kubrick fans would argue that Adam and Matthew's Full Metal Jacket Diary app is just such a one for the iPad, as a brand new, incredibly immersive way to experience a book. The app includes numerous special features, including web links relating to the project. In one of them, from 2010, Matthew writes, "Last spring I was gifted an iPad. It's an interesting device. I downloaded a couple of iBooks and different apps. It's pretty cool. I also owned a Kindle, but wasn't enthusiastic about the prospect of reading on it. My friend and I were talking about the experience of reading on electronic devices and imagined that if a developer could make the experience more cinematic and interactive, then digital books could take the reader on a unique journey. I realized then that my friend and I could do just that, and that the iPad could be the perfect platform to re-release my book. My friend became my design partner and producer on the Full Metal Jacket Diary app." So, Adam, you're obviously the friend here, brother. Welcome to Kubrick's Universe. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. I'm a fan of your podcast, and I'm just, of course, a huge fan of all things Kubrick. So it's a perfect place to be.
Awesome, man. Thank you for taking your time with us. Can you tell us how you and Matthew originally became friends that day at the store?
Yeah. I mean, it actually started prior to the event, I was, as you mentioned, I was working in the marketing department at Apple at the time, and one of my primary responsibilities were programming these events, these sort of talks with creative professionals. They could be photographers, filmmakers, actors, authors. Didn't really matter as long as there was some tie back to Apple technology at that time. And again, this goes back to, started around 2002 through like 2009. So it's the 2000s decade, however you say that. I don't know. It's easier, it's great. You can say the 80s, the 90s, but it's hard to go the O's, I
know. I've heard the aughts. So
yeah,
I guess, people, the aughts. Right.
The aughts. So that might be it. So that was, at the time, this is really pre-iPhone, pre-iPad, all of this. It was really just the Mac and the various programs that people were using in the kind of professional creative community, such as Final Cut Pro for editing and Photoshop and all the Adobe applications, which are still around today, of course. For publishing, Macs were a big thing. So this book was designed, of course, and published using Mac computers at the time. And so I was actually pitched the idea of doing this talk with Matthew, and I was like, oh, of course, I'm a huge Kubrick fan of the film, and it's one of my top films, actually. And I said, let's do it. And so Matthew, who actually doesn't live far from the Apple store in Soho in New York City, which is in southern Manhattan, south of Houston Street. He lives in the Village, just north of Washington Square, around where NYU is. And
where Stanley used to play chess.
Yeah, exactly. He was a hop, skip, and a jump away from those chess tables. He actually is bi-coastal, Matthew. He lives, depending on work, he's either in LA or New York. In fact, nowadays, with the film industry being in all different cities and countries, he's constantly traveling. He's constantly in Vancouver or Atlanta or London.
Of course, yeah.
He's going all over the place. So anyway, so we were able to meet a few times prior to the actual event to sort of talk about the presentation, the structure, and that was a great experience. We just sort of, he just rode his bike down to the store. I met him at the store, and there was an office there where we kind of sort of like a green room office space where we could meet and sort of talk about, what he wanted to show, and just go over the event itself. And that's when we started just sort of hitting it off. We just sort of seemed to have, despite our age difference, I'm almost 40, but he's, in his late 50s now, but at the time, he was, I think, about 45. And we just sort of, connected. We put a big sign at the front of the Apple store saying that, like on an easel, saying that Matthew Modine would be there to discuss his new hardcover book. It actually had a metal cover, which was beautiful, and it was a limited edition book. Only 20,000 copies were printed.
Right.
And it was this sign in the storefront. That was at the time the only Apple store in New York City. Now there, I think, and all over New Jersey as well.
Oh yeah. No, I went to an Apple store recently, and there was an Apple store inside the restroom of the Apple store. That's how ubiquitous they are.
Exactly. It's gotten, and in England too. They're all over the place. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that sign at the front of the store. Matthew said he had more friends, people he hasn't talked to in years, call him and email him and say, I just saw that you're going to be at the Apple store doing a talk, because so many people would frequent that store. It was always so much and a lot of them actors and directors and everyone you can imagine used to go into that store when it was the only location in New York. As most of these people, I met people from Steven Spielberg to Sidney Pollack, and those, all these people just would come in there, and whether they were going to the Genius Bar for technical support, or just shopping, buying some Christmas gifts. Yeah, so it just was remarkable because he said that he had more people reach out to him about that talk and seeing his face on this sign, this billboard, than he had in a couple years for any of his movies. So it was just one of the, at the time, it was an interesting thing. So we had a huge event, overflow crowd, everybody standing around. There was a slideshow of the photographs that he took on the set. And he had, of course, a conversation with a moderator about the film. So it just was a huge hit. We kept in touch. We actually then took this little event on the road, and Matthew went to the Regent Street store in London and did the same event, then to the North Michigan Avenue store in Chicago as well. So it was just a fun event that we decided we'll send him wherever we can, wherever we have a store big enough to accommodate a crowd like that. And at the time there were only us 3 or 4. And so we kept in touch for the next 3 or 4 years, both living in the city. We would get together now and then, for coffee or lunch or something. And when I decided to leave Apple to sort of pursue my original passions of working in film, he reconnected and started talking about things we might want to collaborate on. And I, of course, was and continued to be a huge fan of his book, which had sold out. It pretty much sold out almost instantly.
Yeah.
You can't really find. You can find copies on eBay and Amazon, but they're mostly used copies. You'll rarely find a new copy unless a box, surfaces.
Yeah,
And
right.
It does happen every now and then. A box will pop up, but every copy had a serial number laser etched on the back. So they really are collectible books, like coffee table books, that if you have one, it really is a great work of art that you can pass down. It's something, that's what Matthew liked about it, is that it was something that people could hold on to and maybe pass on to somebody, their children one day. And I said, people love this book. They ask all the time where I can read it, how can I get it? And he would always tell me, well, I don't want to do a paperback edition. I don't want to do another printing. I really want those books to be special.
Interesting. Wow.
They got one. They were owning a little piece of history, a little collectible that they were lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time to get a copy. And that's it. So at the time, it was 2010, and the iPad was just announced, and there weren't really any other tablet computers out there at that point. And I started thinking maybe there would be a new way that we could introduce his story, his diary, his photographs to a new audience that would still retain the uniqueness and collectability of those books that were out, in the world. So I kind of pitched him on this idea of creating an app, a version of his book that would be interactive, and it could include audio of him reading his diary. It could include more photographs that were not included in the hardcover edition, because, of course, in publishing, every page is money. So you have to be very, just like in film, you have to be very careful with what you include and what you decide to take out. So there were a lot of photos in the book, but many of them could not be included. So they had to, pick the best ones. So then anyway, we discussed it, we brainstormed, and he was like, I think it's a great idea, because this will be a new way for people to experience it. In fact, even people who own the book may want to get the app to sort of experience it in yet another way with this additional content. So it sort of met his criteria of not wanting to publish the book again, but at the same time creating something that would allow all the fans of both him and the film, but also of Kubrick, to have access to the material in a new way.
Well, I mean, there's no question it's a resounding success. The app itself is absolutely, essential owning for any and all Kubrick enthusiasts, and it really is just great. I also think it's fascinating that Matthew had that integrity to not want it released as a paperback. I just think that's a testament to his insight about what he had created and what you guys took to the next level with the app. So, I mean, you've given us some differences between the original hardcover and the app, which of course had the opportunity to include a lot more photos and just obviously be far more interactive. Were there any other ways you remember thinking like, oh, I really take advantage of this iPad platform in this way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the big thing for me was this high resolution Retina display that they had just announced. I think it was with the second generation iPad.
Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, we quickly realized that so first we had to find the assets from the book, which wasn't easy because the publisher that published the book, Rugged Land was the name of the publisher. They went out of business or were acquired by another company, and somehow they were dissolved. Something happened, and so in the original deal Matthew had with them, it stated that if the publisher was to go out of business or whatever, that they would the full rights to publishing the book in any format would go back to Matthew, would revert to Matthew. It's his diary. They're his photographs anyway, but he didn't have to worry about any type of partnering with a publisher. So we were really able to say, let's just do this ourselves. Let's not worry about working with a publishing company. Let's just do it independently and do it our way, take our time and do it right. And in a way, we kept thinking we're kind of doing what Kubrick would do. We're just sort of going to make the best thing we can make. And if it takes a year, it takes a year. If it takes 2 years, it takes 2 years. And it ended up taking 2 years. So yeah. We didn't have this pressure to sort of finish it by a deadline, which is not nice. We did want to get it out by the 25th anniversary of the film's original release, which was 2012. That was sort of a goal. And we thankfully made that deadline. But anyway, we were going through the various features. The Retina display was a big part of it. And when we finally tracked down the original scans from the book, we realized that they just weren't at a resolution that we felt the Retina display would take advantage of. So I made the decision, and this was me, not Matthew. I said, what if we found all your negatives and we did new professional drum scans of those negatives so that they get every little bit of detail in them? And he's like, yeah, let's try. So we did a lot of digging through storage lockers of Matthew's and boxes, and we found most of the original negatives that he took with his Rolleiflex camera, which is a 2¼ by 2¼ inch medium format film camera. This is long before digital. So these are big, 2¼ by 2¼ inch negatives are huge compared to a 35 millimeter frame. So there is so much information in each of these negatives that when we started scanning them, professionally, and we started zooming in, we were seeing things. Matthew was seeing things that he didn't even know were in the frames, details and people in the background, and they also were a little dark in the book, the way that they originally were. The original photos were scanned, and that is something else. The book photos were not scanned from the negatives. They were scanned from prints that Matthew had back in 1986.
Big difference.
So that's a huge difference as well.
Yeah.
So you were only going to get what was on the print, and if they were printed a little too dark, which they were, that's what you were getting. And if you zoom in, it doesn't matter how high the DPI is on your scanner, you're not going to get anything more out of those prints than what's there. Right. So by scanning these negatives, we were really able to get detail that was sort of lost in the original scans. And on the iPad, they just looked amazing. And that was the intention, But we also ran into a problem in that these scans were massive in file size. So they made the app very large as well. So we had to make a decision. Do we make the app smaller in file size by reducing the size of the images that we include, meaning they won't be able to zoom in as much on the photos and sort of explore them, or do we just say this is it? We don't care how big the app is. It's as big as it needs to be to give the customer the experience that we want them to have. And that's ultimately what we decided to do, is to say, if it's big, it's big, and that's, again, sort of a Kubrick thing,
Yeah, absolutely.
Shouldn't
clearly
sacrifice quality. Yeah, you should never sacrifice quality because something might be too long or too big or whatever. Like, you just need to make it be what it should be. And so that was the big thing. Was the really big chore was the scanning of over 400 negatives. And then, of course, the next thing we realized is we have audio. We can create a great immersive audio track that can be married to the photographs. But we didn't want it to just be a slideshow. We didn't want it to be. We wanted them to really feel like they belong together. So then we started to work with our designer, Jason Perry, who really helped us figure out a user interface that was unique, a way that the customer, the user, could either at their leisure read the app or listen to the story by Matthew, and there would be photographs that were sort of linked to each section of each diary entry that you were either reading or listening to.
Right.
This was something that this framework didn't exist. We looked all over; it just didn't exist. So we had to build it from scratch, and that was another level of work and time and
innovation. Frankly.
Yeah, innovation, exactly. So it took that extended the timeline even further. So there was a lot of things about it that really we were doing. I think at the time we were the first to do them. If it's very likely that others have done similar things since, being 5-6 years ago now. But at the time, I think we were really trying to do something that we started to dub it an appumentary. We kind of felt that it was going beyond just like an app or an ebook or anything of that nature.
Love it. Yeah.
This is something a little unique. It's sort of somewhere between, a book and a documentary. And we kind of coined that term. I don't know if
that's a great term. No, I love it. Keep it. Copyright it.
Exactly.
Do it now. I mean, clearly you guys made the right decision by going for the boxes and finding those negatives and stuff. And I wonder, when you were helping Matthew rifle through all that stuff, how many adoring fan letters you might have come across from all his legion of female
we
fans
did
around the world, of course.
Well,
but no, I mean, seriously, I think the fact that you guys put such great care and attention to detail with the just the absolute most pristine resolution of those images on the iPad app is what makes it, what they call a killer app. And given what you were describing about wanting people to really be able to zoom in and stuff, it was, almost a perfect synergy of the iPad's introduction to the public and yours and Matthew's app hitting, the market at the perfect time, because, here we are, and the Blade Runner sequel just came out, and I still don't have Rick Deckard's Esper machine to let me go inside photographs and kind of go around corners and look into the mirrors yet.
Exactly.
But fingers crossed that, Tyrell Corporation's working on that for me. But I think it's just beyond apparent the great care that was taken with the photos. And now, to that point, a question I would like to ask for the many photography enthusiasts, the professional and amateur photographers alike, who are of course, also Kubrick diehards. There's so much detail and presence, compared to the 35 millimeter photography we're often used to. And I'm wondering if Matthew had instead shot with a 35 millimeter camera. Do you think those photos would have still made the app?
Well, we did include some 35 millimeter shots because it's a funny story, actually. But early in the production, Matthew was interested in trying to impress Stanley by taking pictures with an old Rolleiflex camera, because he knew that when he shot for Look magazine in the 40s, that he used a Rolleiflex. So he thought, if I bring this, he borrowed one from a friend, and he thought, if I bring it and start taking some pictures here and there, that Stanley will kind of, it'll be something to kind of break the ice and kind of give them something to talk about.
Cool.
Any actor going into a Stanley Kubrick production, I think, wants to find that something that they can relate to and connect to. And Matthew's always been a painter and a photographer and has loved, all types of art. So it was it was a great idea. But when he started taking a few pictures early on, Kubrick said, I think the quote was, "If you're going to take pictures on my set, can't use that piece of shit." It's like this old camp. So, and he proceeded to, and the key part of that was, if you're going to take pictures on my set, that was the part that I think resonated with Matthew, because he never allowed pictures on his sets. He was very, unless it was sanctioned by him. So he didn't want his crew and actors taking pictures. Now, many of them did. They snuck pictures with little cameras all the time. But to be sort of granted full reign for Kubrick to not be worried that taking pictures would upset him or cause any kind of tension on set was a huge deal. But Kubrick said, if you're going to take pictures, you should get this camera, this Minolta camera, which is a really new 35 millimeter, camera. It was a consumer camera.
Yeah,
but
I had one.
He thought that was the camera that was he thought it was better than this beautiful old Rolleiflex. So Leon Vitali, his assistant, went out and bought this camera and brought it back, and they opened it up together, and Matthew had both of them. He had his Rolleiflex and this 35 millimeter Minolta. So he actually did take a few rolls with that camera, and we included some of those pictures, and we scanned the negatives as well. But even the negative scans just don't have the same information in them. They just don't have the same depth. The black and white Rolleiflex shots are just so beautiful. They're so artistic by comparison. And we got those.
I was going to say, I'm sorry. I just think that I have to just slip this in that. For me, as an artistic soul, or one who tries to consider himself one anyway, like, it really speaks volumes of what I would call Matthew's artistic integrity, that he would show up on the set knowing he's getting the chance to be the lead in a Stanley Kubrick film, and he's thinking, if I bring a Rolleiflex, perhaps he might, like me, or he might see that, I'm operating on my own frequency, and I just think that's a great little aside you threw in there. I have to point that out. That's awesome. Yeah,
no, it's great, and they did hit it off. They really did. And Matthew would go to his estate all the time, and they would shoot guns together. Like, people don't know, but Stanley loved guns, and he had essentially Tommy guns. So that he would shoot at fruit things.
Observational diary. Subject: street sweeper. Date: June 1985. Location: Kubrick Estate. Carrie and I have come over for another Indian curry dinner. Takeout, or takeaway as they call it here. All Stanley seems to eat is vegetable curry. A couple of his daughters are vegetarians, so he's been trying it out. After dinner, Stanley and I go outside for a walk. Kubrick:
Do you like to shoot?
Modine: Photos? Kubrick:
No.
guns.
Time, minutes later. Location, beautiful vegetable garden.
Stanley has laid out a very unusual target. He's taken a watermelon from his garden and separated it from the rest of his fruits and vegetables. Stanley shows me a 12-gauge shotgun with a pistol grip and a drum that you wind up like a clock. The drum holds a dozen or so shells. Kubrick.
It's called a street sweeper. When you fire, the drum turns automatically. It's a semi-automatic, short-range weapon.
It looks like a Tommy gun. I hold the gun against my side, like Babyface Nelson. I fire at the hapless watermelon. I see now why Stanley set the melon aside. Not being familiar with the weapon, I could have easily destroyed his entire vegetable garden. This thing is literally a street sweeper, not for dirt, but for anybody that's in your way. After a couple of tries, I finally connect, sending the red pulp and green flesh of watermelon all about the garden. I look at Stanley. He smiles with approval. Boys will be boys. We'll eat what we kill.
Kubrick was a unique individual, and Matthew got to really get to know him on a very personal level, and over the course of almost 2 years, really, because that's how long between all of the pre-production leading into the first half of the film was actually the Vietnam half they filmed first. Everyone would assume you shoot boot camp first, but they actually filmed the Vietnam half.
Right, of course,
first.
Of course.
And I think it was, he's not sure why, but everyone seems to think, the actors seem to think, because then they were going to shave their heads, so you might as well have them all with the longer hair.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
Exactly.
So
I saw Full Metal Jacket twice at opening weekend. I was in high school, and then I went to see it again the following weekend, and I picked up immediately that, having already several years of being fascinated with Kubrick under my belt and reading about him and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got to the end of the picture, I was like, right, well, it's a 2-act play as opposed to the conventional 3-act structure. And yes, he basically filmed it in reverse.
Right. Well, and to add to that, Matthew told me about this, that Kubrick really believed that it was a 3-act play. It's just that it's hard for people to see it that way in the film. There really are 3 distinct acts.
Yes.
It's just the first 40 minutes being boot camp feels like half of the movie when really it's only a third of the film.
Yes.
And then they get, to what's the name, to like the base, where there's a whole, and there's the attack on the base. That's a whole section right there. That's
right.
And
no,
then
I should.
The end.
Yes, with the sniper. I should have been clearer in that I was referring to my first impression as a teenager. But you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I just bring it up because there were a lot of critics at the time that criticized it for being 2 movies. Roger Ebert was one very well.
Oh, please, with that guy.
Yeah. So, and there's a famous, if you've never seen it, but there's a really great fun, it's on YouTube, argument between Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert.
I've seen it. Oh, yeah.
And they really go at each other.
Some of those scenes, especially the first 2, might make you think that Full Metal Jacket resembles the dark irony of Stanley Kubrick's classic 1963 anti-war film, Dr. Strangelove. But you'd only be about half right. There is irony in this movie, and satire, and comedy, but there is also way too much routine war footage. The opening scenes in basic training recycle material we've seen before, all except for a brilliant performance by Vincent D'Onofrio as a pudgy weakling who the Marines turn into a psychopath. That was him we saw looking up at the camera in that earlier scene. And there is more recycling at the end of the film, which is devoted to that firefight in the ruins of a burning city, a sequence that was shot on a giant set and looks like it and reminded me more of World War II war movies than of the special war in Vietnam. We expect an original masterpiece from Stanley Kubrick every time out, and this time I'm afraid, not a bad movie, but it's not original and it's not a masterpiece.
Oh, I think it's very original and very close to being a masterpiece. I mean, first of all, I think that the stuff that we see, the training sequences, are absolutely startling. Even though this is familiar material, I think that image that we got of that guy is explosive, and I'll never forget it. Second, the fighting here is a different kind of fighting than in Platoon. It's city fighting, and it looks different, and it's a whole different war, and he's playing this film, I think, at a whole nother level. Platoon was about embracing the soldier and giving the soldier credit for this crazy world that he was in. This fighting, to me, is about the mixture of joy in fighting and the absolute fear of being killed, in the sense of when there's this guy called Animal who charges, I was so excited for him. And this is a guy I'm supposed to hate. And then when I see a sniper go on an American and Kubrick has his camera push in, I feel for the first time people getting attacked. I think visually this is the strongest movie I've seen in a long time.
First of all, I didn't think it was that visually exciting except for a few specific shots that were really great. But secondly, let's talk about that very sequence you're talking about. One of the guy's friends is wounded and he's out there under fire, and the other one says, I'm going to go get him, and he runs out blasting with his machine gun to try to rescue him. Then later, the others come up behind, and we can clearly see where the sniper is. Then when you get to that reverse shot and he pushes in, that is a cliche, Gene. I mean, when I saw that push, I was so disappointed in Kubrick. This whole sequence is taken right out of absolutely routine grade B Republic, World War II war movies of guys running out there to try to save their buddy and somebody else shooting at them.
I have never felt a kill in a movie quite like that, ever, in any Vietnam film.
Not in Apocalypse Now, not in The Deer Hunter?
Not like that. Not like that.
Well, then in that case, you're going to love The Late Show, because they have kills like that every night in black and white, starring John Wayne, starting about midnight.
But they don't have movies like this film, Full Metal Jacket.
I disagree, and I disagree particularly about the part that you like.
Well, that's just one scene. I like the whole film. It's full of great scenes. When it comes to films about war and warriors, Stanley Kubrick is a master.
He knows what he's doing. But you know, the real buried subject here is our disagreement about Full Metal Jacket, and I would be very surprised if you like that movie in 30 years as much as you like this one today. I don't think it's going to hold up that well. It's not one of his great films.
In the world of films as made today, Full Metal Jacket is a film to recommend. Full Metal Jacket is a very, very fine film.
My opinion is the Full Metal Jacket is not Kubrick at the top of his form, which we've just seen here.
Roger, it is not as good as those two films, which are among the greatest films ever made. But for you on this show to give thumbs down to Full Metal Jacket, I think is a gross mistake. I think it is a film worth seeing.
I'm trying to put the movie in a context, and I'm trying to tell people that it is not as good.
And this is the show where you give Benji the Hunter a positive review and not Kubrick.
Now, Gene, that's totally unfair, because you realize that these reviews are relative. Benji the Hunter is not 1/3 the film, 1/10 the film that the Kubrick film is, but you know that the same thing happens, that you review films within context. So it's not fair for you to compare those two reviews, and you know it, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
No, I'm not.
Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed this week. We disagreed, as we just said, on Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket. Gene thinks it's brilliant. I thought it had flashes of brilliance, but was an overall disappointment. Another disagreement on Mel Brooks' Spaceballs. Gene laughed more than I did. 1 thumb up, 1 thumb down. 2 thumbs up, though, for Steve Martin's Roxanne, a charming comedy. And finally, a disagreement on Benji the Hunted. Gene didn't even like the title. I thought it was ideal for its target audience.
Full Metal Jacket. Roger, again, I don't think you would really tell people to miss it, and you even almost want people to see and have a good time at Spaceballs. Consider your thumb. Look at your thumb over the weekend. That's it for this week. Next time we'll be back for reviews.
I was an 80s teen, so I grew up on Siskel and Ebert at the movies, because there was no internet, and it was the home video and VCR revolution, which is how my generation, discovered Kubrick, being able to watch his movies over and over on our VHS players. But, I don't know. I watched it several times, and again, most recently a couple months ago. And I just am shocked how much I used to look up to Ebert, because now he's just, I hate to, smite the corpse, as they say, but he does come across as a bit of a blowhard. And it's funny how often he changed his tune about films, which you later became, and I just want to add to that, it really shouldn't matter to anyone, let alone an average Kubrick fan, that, if Full Metal Jacket is a traditional 3-act structure, in fact, or it's, a 2-act structure, or it's 2 movies pieced together, as they put it. Like, what does it matter? That's just one more layer of what made Kubrick.
Right. He
did it his way. He didn't say, "Oh, I have to follow this traditional storytelling, structure. I'm going to make the movie I want to make." But one of the things I obviously, when we started recording Matthew, reading his diary, I was sort of almost memorizing it at that point, because I was listening in the sound booth, if he would make mistakes, I just didn't think he was reading it just the right way. I would have to kind of give him some direction. I mean, he mostly directed himself, which he did a great job. He really tried to read it as if he was the 26-year-old version of himself.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. That's why it's so great for people that don't understand. It's not a retrospective. It's not a memoir. This was the diary he kept on the set.
I know.
And
it's amazing.
It's what he was feeling at the time, warts and all. It's everything in there. There's no, even the times he and Kubrick were at odds, or he was having really difficult things going on in his personal life, like his wife having to have a cesarean section in London with his first son, with his first child being born. He put it all, he didn't take much out. And that's, I think, why people really love it, is that it is such a all-inclusive diary of not just the filmmaking, but of what he was going through at the time, and not just him, but the process of how he got the part, like how he heard about the part from Val Kilmer, who was pissed at him for getting the part, and Matthew didn't have any clue he had the part, because he never sent in an audition tape.
I'm sitting in a booth eating soy pancakes with my best friend, David Alan Grier. I can't help noticing an angry guy cursing loudly in our direction. There's a wall behind us, so unless this guy's got Tourette's or is practicing a monologue, he's clearly cursing at me. I point out this foul-mouthed offender to David Allen. David Allen looks over his shoulder. That's Val Kilmer. He's cool. David Allen tells me how he helped Val Kilmer with the music on the movie Top Secret. David Allen goes over and they talk and laugh. Then David waves me over. I get up and go to Val's booth. Val stops smiling. His face twists up like he just ate a lemon. I say something innocuous like, "What's up?" Val lets me know why he's upset. He's fed up with me getting parts that he could be playing. True, I'm having a good run. After Streamers, I worked with Harold Becker on Vision Quest, Diane Keaton and Mel Gibson on Mrs. Soulful, and then Alan Parker on Birdie. As it turns out, my participation in those films is just the foundation for his present anger. What Val is really pissed off about is that he heard that I'm now going to star in Stanley Kubrick's new movie, Modine. If I am, I don't know anything about it. I knew Kubrick was making a new film, but you had to audition for it by sending him a videotape. Putting yourself on video is a big pain in the ass. Unless you have a lot of dough and you can buy one of those big fucking VHS cameras, you have to go and kiss up to somebody who owns one. I don't want to bother with all that. I guess Val did. Modine. And I'm not going to apologize for getting jobs that you or anyone else have been up for. David Allen, charming guy that he is, makes light of the escalating unpleasantness, and we all go back to our pancakes. Of course, I can't wait to get outside.
It's all these types of stories that I think people love. It's sort of a little window into 80s Hollywood, as well as 80s London. 80s, because they filmed a lot of scenes at Pinewood Studios, like the interior scenes. So there was just a lot of great stuff that.
Oh yeah, and the abandoned Becton Gas Works, which
that's right.
And importing all those palm trees and everything. I mean, it's just incredible. There's a shot where all the tanks and you just see helicopters going past. And I remember years ago learning that Kubrick just had the chopper pilots kind of like go into a thunderhead out of shot and do a bank turn, come back around again. So he got dozens of helicopters out of a handful. It's just, I mean, that type of guerrilla filmmaking never left him from the kid on the streets of New York. I love knowing that kind of stuff.
And the palm trees that were shipped in from Spain they only had a dozen or so, but they just kept putting them in potted basins and moving them around wherever the camera was. So they just found a way. Like you said, it really is guerrilla filmmaking. And something that Matthew always says is that it was a very small crew. It was a very tight-knit, small crew that if you would think this is a huge war movie, but it wasn't really. It was like an independent movie in many ways. And that's just, that's the amazing thing about it. So.
And now you were talking a few moments ago about the very personal nature of Matthew doing the voices for the app and why that was so important to him. So I got to ask, I mean, there seem to be a lot of very different sounding voices in the app. Did Matthew do all of them? Yeah, so it's kind of funny because when we set out to start recording, in the diary, he did write down a lot of things that other people said, including Stanley, including Leon Vitali, including other actors. So he would basically write in quotes, like what people were saying to him to kind of remember this. And this again goes back to the fact that he was playing a combat war journalist for Stars and Stripes. So Stanley encouraged him to do this, to keep this diary on the set as well as take the photographs. And Matthew, of course, was just sort of taking personal notes for himself until Stanley started to say, "Hey, Matthew, what are you writing there? Why don't you stand up and read it for everybody?" So that encouraged him to... Is this something you'd care to share with the class, Mr. Yeah, Matthew? Exactly. So that made him just be a better writer and start to really write a very detailed diary because he wanted it to sound intelligent. He wanted it to sound accurate. Yes. So it of course, this all benefited the book and app later, the fact that he had such detailed notes. But when it came time to do all those voices, did he ever share with you like what was his approach or what was the germ of that idea? Yeah, so what he wanted to do actually was get other actors he knew to play those parts. Wow. And I said, "No, Matthew, I think that's a cool idea, but this is your diary. We're in your head. Yes. You should really be hearing this the way you remember it from your point of view. So the way you remember Stanley Kubrick sounding when he said this to you, you should try to bring that to the reading."
The kettle whistles. Kubrick prepares the coffee with a French press. I've never seen coffee made this way. For me, watching Kubrick making coffee is like being in a chemistry class with Albert Einstein. Kubrick.
Do you think it's too...
He either loses himself in the coffee or chooses not to finish the sentence, preferring perhaps for me to finish it. I hesitate. Kubrick.
There are no bad ideas, only better ones. Let's not say, "That wouldn't work," or "That's a stupid idea." If it's a stupid idea, the rule is we don't judge. We just keep moving forward until we find the right answer. Okay?
Modine. Okay. I like the ending. I really feel that it's powerful. I think it shows, without saying it outright, that we seem to prepare for war our whole life. Kubrick.
Really?
Modine. Yeah, it's one of the things that I liked most about the script. It's a powerful image to end with. Stanley presses the coffee grounds to the bottom of the glass pitcher. I can't help feeling that he's discovered some new scientific way to make coffee. He pours 2 styrofoam cups full of the thick black liquid. Kubrick.
Milk? Sugar?
Modine. Milk. Stanley pours the milk into my coffee. Kubrick.
It doesn't seem right.
Modine. It's too black? Kubrick.
No. The ending.
It was a collaboration. He really brought his, acting chops to this performance, not just playing a version of himself, a younger version, but also all these other sort of characters. And there's words are one thing, but he really tried his best to do an impression of Kubrick the way he remembered sounding, and again, he does it. He pulls it off, man. He has the memory of whether he was pissed off or annoyed and how to kind of add that twist to it. So I think that because it was a diary and not like a stage play, that was the right choice. If it was a different type of production, his idea of or the initial idea, I should say, because we both liked the idea of having the other actors come in and do the, we even thought maybe we can get Lee Ermey, to read his lines.
Sure.
But having Matthew do his impression of Lee Ermey, I think was more effective.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So,
I mean, what's also so cool about it is I've always found Matthew's voice to have its own unique cadence and timbre, and it's the same with singers. I'm a musician as well, and there's just some people who have what you'd call a signature voice when they sing, and it's often the same with people who have speaking roles, say on the radio, what have you, or podcasting, but specifically with actors. And it's really incredible the way Matthew is doing all of those voices. And like you say, even the inflection of recalling whether or not Stanley was angry when he said this or that, and to know that it's still Matthew Modine's voice doing all that by himself is also a testament. I mean, you either have that at birth or you don't. It's not something everybody gets, right?
Yeah.
And then to be like, I mean, what I consider a real thespian, like a master of his craft on top of that, and to have that voice that's just instantly recognizable. No doubt one of the reasons why my dear mom has had an undying crush on Matthew Modine for many, many years now, but I digress.
Was it Vision Quest? Was Vision Quest the one she loved? A lot of people
loves them all. She can just, I mean, you can just say Matthew Modine and she's, oh, Matthew Modine, he's so handsome, he's so intelligent, he always sounds so great in interviews, like he always knows what he's about to say 2 minutes ahead. And my mom's great. My mom is actually, she's a visual artist. She's she actually does a lot of acrylic on canvas and makes her living as an artist. And my mom has the same birthday as Christiana, who is, of course, also an artist. They're both born May 10th.
That's great.
Which I always thought was a cool bit of synergy. Yes. And when I was at the Barry Lyndon with Live Orchestra event, which you were at, and we didn't know each other then. Right. I posted a comment on the official Stanley Kubrick Facebook page. And about 3 months went by, and I was just like living my little life and working and such. And one day I get a Facebook notification that said, Matthew Modine likes your comment in Stanley Kubrick. And I had just written some hopefully thoughtful words about what made the event so unique. I believe it was a post wishing a happy birthday to Ryan O'Neal, and I'd written something about, it's a shame he couldn't have attended. He would have been treated like, royalty,
yes,
et cetera.
Yeah.
And just, so then of course I had to screenshot that and send it to my mom and be like, guess who gave your son's comments a like? And she was, of course, oh my gosh, Matthew Modine. And anyway, she's a wonderful soul and
that's great.
A true artist, and she has very good taste. She and my dad saw 2001 in 1968 when I was just a zygote. They were just they were on a date
when you were just a star child.
Exactly. Yeah. If only I could hope to be so. They went and I guess they were just dating. They were two 21-year-old baby boomers. Well, hippies they called them back then.
Yeah.
And they've both told me the story many times over the years. How it absolutely changed them both, the experience of 2001 on a big screen. And last month I got to tell my folks I had the wonderful opportunity to interview Dan Richter, who's now become our friend. Dan, of course, being Moonwatcher, the lead man ape from 2001, and the guy who was the brilliant mime artist who was charged by Kubrick with training the entire troupe of mimes in the performances we see there. So anyway, I digress, but
no, I agree. 2001 is one of my all-time favorite films, and I actually got to see it on a giant screen during the Tribeca Film Festival. I don't know, maybe
awesome,
like 8 years ago, and Matthew was there, and just to talk a little bit, to participate in a Q&A with Buzz Aldrin, who was there as well. And
hey, he's from my hometown. He's from Montclair, New Jersey. They just renamed.
Awesome.
Renamed one of the public schools after Buzz. No
Yeah.
kidding.
So it was just interesting because there were a few other people up on stage as well, but it was just interesting to hear his perspective on it. Having, it came out a year before, they landed on the moon, and of course, with all the controversy or conspiracies around Kubrick being director, it was just an interesting thing to have. You have an actor that worked with Kubrick, you had somebody who was on the moon, all watching this film on the big screen.
Incredible.
It was just a fun experience. So I got to shake Buzz's hand, and I didn't know what else to say to him. I just said, "It's an honor." I can't even have a conversation with this person because I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I mean, he's seen Earth from a lunar orbit. I mean, it's just incredible.
Like we're seeing it on a big screen. He's probably thinking, "I've seen that for real."
Yeah, exactly. I don't need to see it. I lived it.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is one of those times where I'm glad we get to veer just slightly off topic, because otherwise, our listeners wouldn't get to hear about you seeing 2001 on the big screen with Matthew Modine and Buzz Aldrin.
Right.
Like Kubrick's universe, listeners, does not get cooler than that. Okay,
right.
Take note.
How often does that happen? And it was a one-off screening, special event. I don't know if it was an anniversary year. It might have been 2008. Actually, it might have been it, because that would have been the 40th. Is that or
2008 would have been the 40th. The 40th. Yep.
Yeah. So that probably was when it was. It was So it was over. It was about 9 years ago. Yeah.
It's almost inconceivable that it's coming up on 50 years. I mean, even when you look at the technology, there's an image you might have seen. You Google search it, and it's a production still of the receptionist in the pink outfit, and she's using the portable suitcase telecommunicator device, which is like a precursor. Of course, Keir and Gary Lockwood are on the very pseudo iPad devices.
That's right. Yeah.
BBC broadcast and the other stuff, but it's just incredible how much they got right. I know,
and that's something we actually, when we were working on developing this app, we were talking about this. Like, what would Stanley think of something like this? The iPad, with all of his, he was very, as you know. He loved technology and the latest technologies. He wanted everything about new things coming out, like whether they were cameras or whether they were computers. He was really interested. And, during the making of this app, I did get to meet Leanne Vitale and Stanley's daughter, Vivian. And I was, we were able to talk with them about it and get thoughts from them. And they all agreed that when the app was done, that this really, and Matthew in particular, really felt that Stanley would be proud of it, that he would love it, that he would think this is such a cool way to kind of make a companion sort of story to a film, that people could see the making of aspect of a film.
Yes.
And, that he would love iPads, that he would have one on him all the time. And
absolutely, man. That's just so cool. I mean, and I have to veer into because this question is, there's been occasional debate, between PC people and Mac users, and the question usually goes, which do you think Stanley would have preferred? And I've seen it in our group, Stanley Kubrick Appreciation Society, from time to time. And, people can have their debates. And I can't help but think, not to presume anything, but I can't help but think Stanley would have been like an all-of-the-above guy.
Yeah, I agree. I think he would have one of everything. And he would want to be familiar with everything. I know he did have an IBM computer in like 1985, a modern computer of that time, or maybe it was 84. I'm not sure, but I think that I think all agree that he probably would have constantly been, whenever something new came out, he wouldn't sort of say, "Oh, I'm a PC only or Mac only user." He would just be like, whatever's new and cutting edge, he would say, like, I want to see that, I want to try it, I want to learn it, I want to, whatever. And this is how the technology industry goes anyway. Like a good example are with iPhones and Android phones. Like Apple will come out with a really great new iPhone, and then it'll be cutting edge for 6 months, and then Samsung or Google will come out with the next version of their phone, and it will be a little better than the iPhone. And they just kind of keep going back and forth. So adding new features and that will try to one up the other. But I just think what I've heard and conversations I've had, I think he would be more of a equal opportunity technophile.
And like, I love what you said about he would have had an iPad on him at all times. I think that's spot on to assume as much. I can see it. Can't you just picture him with one under his arm and a cup of coffee in the other hand?
Exactly. And somebody like Leon Vitali would have been tasked with making sure it had all the latest storyboards and sketches and script notes and call sheets on it at all times, so he could just go right in there and be up to date on everything.
Yeah, and he would have had yours and Matthew's app on it. I mean,
right.
No question about it, man. It's got to be so. So I want to get back to that and ask.
Yeah, sorry.
A few more. No, don't apologize, please. I'm enjoying this big time. And
just one last thing.
Please. Yeah,
we were very fortunate that Wired magazine, they, in their review, I think the headline was something Stanley Kubrick would have been proud of, and that was like, for us, that was a huge compliment, because that's really what any of us who admire Kubrick would want, right? Is to have that acknowledgement.
Well, precisely. I mean, that is absolute validation coming from Wired, and I mean, I've followed their publications. My mom had the very first issue ever in print, and she had no idea they were going to become the juggernaut of publishing they did. I mean, I just also want to touch upon your point about, because it's brilliant, and I can speak on behalf of the awesome team that I work with in trying to get this podcast done right. What you were saying about just hopefully trying to do something that he would approve of, or that does justice to not just him as an artist or his legacy, but his sensibilities. Not to be presumptuous, but him as the man. I can speak for the others when I say that if we didn't honestly feel that doing Kubrick's universe was for the right reasons, if we weren't able to say, even privately amongst ourselves, gosh, if Stanley's smiling down from the universe right now, like the Star Child, and he tuned into our frequency for a few minutes, picked up on the podcast, we can only hope that he would just go like, okay, good job, boys.
Exactly.
He wouldn't turn his nose up at it, or else we would not be doing this, man.
Right, I agree, and just like that too, it would just be like, yeah, that's good. Not a lot of emotion, just sort of very matter of fact, like this. You guys, like, I approve.
I was gonna say, I'm Stanley Kubrick, and I approve this message.
Exactly.
There you have my first ever Stanley impression for the podcast.
It's hard to do because he didn't have a lot of interviews where you could hear his voice. A lot of people have never heard him speak.
I know, it's incredible.
It's a rare thing. He had that one 1998 recording where he accepted I don't know if it was a DGA award or something.
Yeah.
Because he was filming Eyes Wide Shut, that Leon Vitali actually filmed for him. But there are not a lot of interviews, especially later in his life, where
one of the greatest is from '66. It's on YouTube. I'm sure Stephen can tell me. I'm forgetting who the interviewer was, but it was a very casual conversation recorded on a portable tape deck, and Kubrick's asked about siblings, and he said, "Well, one sister, Barbara Mary, lives in New Jersey." And the first time I heard that, I was like, "Jersey represent."
Yeah.
You know.
I know. People forget because he lived in London for so much of his life that he's a kid from the Bronx.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was Jeremy Bernstein who was, or Bernstein, I forget the pronunciation.
Right.
Who was just a casual friend of his. Thanks, Stephen. My producer coming through, aces as usual.
Yeah.
As always.
With Stanley Kubrick.
So I don't really know much about him. I remember years ago in high school reading The Clockwork Orange first, and then we sat down in class and watched it. And it was so messed up, the movie, but it was intriguing because I kept wanting to watch it, and it just kind of kept me like on the edge of my seat. You didn't know what was going to be true to the book and what he was going to do with the movie. And I think that you can get a little messed up with that. It doesn't always stay true to the book. I think he really stayed true to the book, but gave it a little twist too. And then years later, I watched The Shining, and that was even more messed up. I couldn't like that. I love movies like that. And the way that he depicted each character, everything about them was just super, super intriguing to me because I like fucked up things like that.
There is a button, an info button, on one of the pictures on the app.
Yeah.
And if you click on that, there's this cool little call out which appears, and it gives the complete information and text for it. And then there's a separate icon that says tweet. Does that allow someone to repost that as a tweet? What does that do?
Yeah, it just sends out. It sends a tweet from if you're logged into your Twitter account, and it'll send out a tweet with a sort of a low resolution version of that picture. And it will say, I think it says, I'm trying to remember the exact wording. I'm checking out the Full Metal Jacket Diary app, or something like that. Maybe if you want, and it has a link, I think, to for people to click on it and check it out.
Go check it out. Well, if there's any way to, I have to just offer this, that if there's any way to link, through the app. I mean, I don't mean to assume anything, but SCAS would be obviously more than happy to help promote the app, like, perpetually going forward.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we might do another update in the near future where we could probably incorporate, a similar button for Facebook. I don't know why we decided.
Free advertising.
Yeah, at the time we just decided to try to do Twitter. I can't remember why we didn't do Facebook, but we've made a few periodic updates. Not just obviously every time there's a new iOS update, we have to sometimes fix some things that broken or don't display properly, and so we will put out updates periodically. But and we've added some photos. One of the nice things that has happened is during the production, in addition to Matthew's photos, because I was looking for photos that matched the diary entries, he didn't have photos of everything that he took. So I actually ended up reaching out to a lot of other people that were workers on the set. Some of them were extras. Some of them drove trucks on the set.
Yeah.
And I just said, hey, did you snap any shots or take any pictures that you might be willing to contribute to this project? And I got a few responses, a few people who sent me. One guy named Tony Hayes, who unfortunately just died of cancer. He was an extra on the set for the entire film through both boot camp and Vietnam. Black actor, not African American, because he's not from America. But he was a great
I understand the distinction.
friend. Yes, he became friendly with Matthew on the set. So when we reached out to him, he was like, "Sure, I actually had a little camera on me almost all the time.
Wow.
And I was taking pictures, a little, 35 millimeter kind of point and shoot camera of the day. And he actually mailed me all his negatives. He didn't even develop them all. So I ended up scanning a lot of his negatives. I went through them, on a light box and looked for. They were some of them were in really bad shape, so they didn't all work. But that's how we were able to fill in some of the holes in the story visually, was with other people's photographs, because what we didn't have a lot of were photos of Matthew. He did a few self portraits, and a couple times people may have taken his camera and taken a picture of him and a few other people, but we didn't have the other perspective. So by getting all these other individuals to sort of contribute their images, which again didn't look nearly as beautiful as Matthew's Rolleiflex photographs, but they did add something unique. They added a visual component that really helped the story aspect of the kind of appumentary experience that we were trying to create. So anyway, these extra photos were incorporated, but what happened is we started hearing from people after the app came out and saying, oh, actually, I have some pictures. And I would get folders in the mail with little 4x6 prints from people that.
Wow.
And so I would scan them and in some cases we would, at the next time we were updating, just add them into the sort of there's a bonus photos section on the app where there's just additional pictures that, because we had too many actually at the end, that we couldn't include them all in the actual diary app experience. So we were we were able to include them and add them as we went along, or as we were doing updates. And I have still, even to this day, several hundred more that have never been added. A lot of them just aren't great shots. We tried to curate them a little bit and pick the best ones. Like some of them are just out of focus, or they're just wide shots of, works, which we have tons of.
Right.
It was just, it's great though. I love it. And I'm sure there are still yet even more people out there that have other photographs that
it just
love seeing these other points of view, these other perspectives, whether it's of Kubrick or of Matthew, that we haven't seen before. It's like this little window into the past that
absolutely
I love.
I mean, and it gives you your guys' app, just layer upon layer. When everybody started mailing you those photos and negatives, that must have just been like, manna from heaven to have that. It's like a blooming onion, like where you just get, ever widening circles of imagery and, as you say, perspective that, could be added to the app. And it's one of the things that makes the Full Metal Jacket Diary app truly unique. Did you guys ever consider adding in any video clips to further illustrate some of Matthew's narrative?
We talked about it. We actually did even start, we had this idea, or Matthew really had the idea of a sort of bonus section, which he sort of dubbed the Full Metal Jacket Diary Rauschmann experience, where Matthew would interview other people who were on the set and have them tell a story about one of the stories that he had, like tell it from their point of view.
Oh, and of course he's a Kurosawa fan. It figures.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So cool. Oh man, you just made my day.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So and we did one, and we still have it. We haven't decided how to do what we want to do with it yet, but he interviewed Tim Colcheri or Tim Colseri. I'm not sure how. I've heard people pronounce it both ways, but he was the original drill instructor cast by Stanley before Lee Ermey took over the role.
Right, and then he became the gunner, right?
The door gunner, that's right.
The door gunner. Get some. Get some. Get some,
that's
baby.
Right.
Yeah,
he says, how do you shoot women and children? You don't lead them as
you just don't lead them so much.
Yeah.
Well, it's so funny. One of my best friends, Scott Bross, and I, can quote, Kubrick films chapter and verse, and we often just slip into conversation at, random moments when we're sharing a couple pints of Guinness together and playing guitars. And just the other night, I forget what prompted him. I said something that gave him the perfect window to just go, get some.
Yeah.
And we were cracking up. I mean, and that's another layer again.
Oh, that's a whole other thing.
Stanley.
This film is so quoted. People don't even know they're quoting it, like younger people. It's just like Me So Horny. This has become part of the.
I know.
It just, how does that happen? It doesn't happen. I mean, how many people quote Platoon, which won Best Picture the same year? It's a good film. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that Full Metal Jacket, without a doubt, has had the longer legs, I think, when it comes to those.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, nothing against Platoon. I saw that in the theater as well. And I had an amazing experience, which was that a friend of mine, this was in high school, and my friend Charlie and I were, like just kids, walking around at night, and we walked to the movie theater when we just didn't have anything else to do, and Platoon had already started, right? So we sit down, and it had just been out for a week or so, and the theater's already dark. In other words, we just watched the movie, and we're like, wow, oh my gosh, and the film ends, the lights come up, and Charlie's dad was a Vietnam vet, and what I'll never forget is, when the lights came up at the end of the picture, there were dozens of Vietnam veterans in not proper military dress, but in at least the fatigue jacket, and they stood up and they saluted the screen, and that was really just one of those movie theater memories.
Right.
They can never take away from me. So again, nothing to take away from Platoon. But there's no question that as cinematic experiences go, I mean, the legs that the dialogue has in Full Metal Jacket is just whole other level stuff. I mean,
and the in particular, I think the boot camp sequences have just become required viewing for anybody that goes through any type of training, whether it's firemen or police officers or Marines. Like, this is one of those movies that every new generation of young men and women that are coming up and heading into that type of grueling experience, they all say, I mean, we get letters all the time. They all say that they watch Full Metal Jacket before they go off, to boot camp. And it's like the last thing they watch before they head in. And just, and again, they also compliment it. The people that are serving and have served have complimented the film and Matthew for being one of the most accurate depictions of boot camp, as well as what it's like to be, in war. It's just chaos. There's no story structure to it. It's just, it is what it is. Things just happen randomly.
In the end of the day, I mean, these guys are fighting to keep their friends alive.
Right.
They don't care about the political agenda, or even the war itself, or even the hierarchy, chain of command, and following orders. It just becomes, and that's so evident in the way Adam Baldwin portrays Animal Mother when he tries to go in and it saves Doc J and 8 Ball. It's just that brotherhood that it does not exist in civilized society. It only exists when men or women are in that type of life or death environment, when you can literally never know if this minute you're breathing is your last. My uncle, my mom's brother Albert was a Marine in Vietnam, and he adores Full Metal Jacket, and he also has told me that that's what it is. That at the end you're trying to keep your buddies alive.
Yeah.
I just have to add that just by coincidence, about a decade ago, my dad was on a cross-country flight and just happened to be sitting next to R. Lee Ermey. Now, my dad is a passionate history buff and has a great mind for dates and particularly history of warfare and 20th century warfare. My dad said R. Lee Ermey could not have been nicer, cooler. They chatted the entire 3,500 miles from New York to L.A.
Wow.
And,
That's incredible.
Had a couple bourbons together, I think, or something to that effect. And he just, was happy to share his knowledge. And,
it's another one of those situations where if you're in a confined space, you either embrace the person you're next to or you go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. When it's R. Lee, I don't imagine, you'd be able to go to sleep if he were next to you. I mean, if he fell asleep on you, those eyebrows alone might have woken you up. But I mean, I digress. Sorry.
Somehow I picture him like sleeping straight, like perfectly upright, like with perfect posture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not even like with his top button still, buttoned and everything. Yeah, head back, shoulders straight.
Observational diary. Subject: R. Lee Ermey. Date: September 1985. Location: Beckton Gasworks.
Lots of activity as we get started. Everyone is excited. One guy, Lee Ermey, is so pumped to have been chosen as the technical advisor on a Kubrick movie. I imagine that hundreds of guys tried to grab that job. And I hear that Lee was once a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps.
Time: days later.
Things slowed down a bit today as I watched the auditions for the Paris Island extras. Most of the extras are soldiers in the Territorial Army. I think this is like the British equivalent to the ROTC, or Army Reserves. Tim Colcheri, who Stanley has cast in the role of the drill instructor, yells at the extras while Lee and Leon videotape their reactions. Tim has a good voice and a look for the role, kind of like Jim West in The Wild Wild West. After about a half hour of yelling, Tim says he's finished. Probably not a good idea to blow out his voice before Stanley even starts to film him. We're about to film the Vietnam half, so boot camp should be in about 8 weeks. Tim leaves, and Lee steps in and continues the auditions. It's scary. Lee gets right in their faces and lets them have it. One of the soldiers gets a little nervous and smiles. I guess drill instructors aren't as intense in the Territorial Army. Lee goes off. Lee Ermey, screaming.
Why are you smiling? You want to fuck me?
It is hysterical. If Tim watches how Lee does this, he'll be great.
One thing that makes Full Metal Jacket work and resonate with so many people still to this day, I think, and I've talked about this before with Matthew and others, is that it doesn't look as much like a Vietnam War film as other Vietnam War films.
Yeah.
It really looks like it could be any war at any modern war since World War II. And
absolutely,
that's what I think makes it more timeless, is that you can watch it today and it kind of looks like it could be somewhere in Iraq or Afghanistan at the end.
Right.
Any kind of city that's been turned to rubble. It's really about, I think, war as a whole and about the young men and women, sort of breaking them and rebuilding them into killing machines where they won't be afraid and they can just do their job, do what they're there to do. And I think that's what Kubrick was trying to make.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just going to offer that is the central tenet of what I think, many other more astute than I have, been exploring and discussing about Full Metal Jacket for years, which is, Kubrick's inquiry into the idea of, what does it do to the mind and the soul of a young, innocent boy who's forced to become a man by way of machination, who's forced to be turned into a killing machine when, many of those guys from my parents' generation, were coming from small towns, many of them, had not even done a semester of college. Some of them, might not have lost their virginity yet and so forth. And to be turned into a killing machine is another layer of what will make Full Metal Jacket something that, like you said, it could take place. It could be any war, especially of the 20th century and onward.
Right.
And it takes that and adds that other layer to it, which is that, you know, like what so many of us love about Kubrick films is that it doesn't leave you with any answer. It's only more questions. And
that's right.
And he does precisely that by leaving it open-ended, because there will never be an answer to the question of what does it do to the mind and soul of a young man. No matter how many more wars our planet is forced to endure, and you know, Stanley's film will always stand as a document to the exploration of that, again, the very tenet of what it's all about.
Yeah.
And you know, so there are more than a lot of people, obviously, who have a lot of envy for Matthew having the chance to work with Stanley on Full Metal Jacket. And you know, it's just an absolutely incredible app. I could go on and on about it, but you know, look, it had to get made at some point. You know, all ideas are just that, and you guys began with a Kickstarter campaign. So I'm going to go back and just ask, like, how important was that? I mean, to get the app brought to fruition.
Yeah, sure. Well, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier, in that we didn't have a publisher involved or any other kind of outside party involved. So we were doing this ourselves, and we decided, well, before we kind of dig into this, let's see if there's an audience for it. We kind of thought Kickstarter might be a fun way, a unique way, a new way to gauge the interest level and see if it was worth doing. And so we just sort of set our goal at a nice round number of $20,000, and we raised a little more than that. Ultimately, it probably cost 4 times that between the two of us, you know, and we obviously got a lot of people to donate time. The one thing great about any kind of Kubrick project is that there's a lot of people that if you say we're working on a really cool Stanley Kubrick project, that will jump at the chance to help you, or to either volunteer their time or give it you, you know, a big discount as the people.
Right.
People that did our audio recording and sound mixing and engineering, they were just terrific. They just wanted to help us. They thought it was a cool idea. They wanted to be attached to it. So we got a lot of help like that, thankfully.
That's so cool. And I mean, and I imagine it's pretty, you know.
And they heard about it through Kickstarter. That was the great thing. Kickstarter became more than just a fundraising tool. It became a way that people heard about the project, people that owned post-production companies, and they would say, hey, if you need help, help on this front, let us know. And we were able to kind of take advantage of some of those offers.
I say it's incredible. I mean, to think that, you know, everybody would offer their services, or again, as you say, you know, deep discount in good faith to be a part of something that, you know, like we in SCAS and now with our podcasts are just trying to honor his legacy and know that it's from the heart, and really want everyone to just get that. That's the moral and ethical imperative. And you know, Kickstarter had to be, you know, integral in getting you up and running. If it's not too technical a question, or if you don't want to answer, it's cool. Just wondering, like, what proportion of your initial budget was helped out by Kickstarter?
Well, as I said, we didn't really have a formal budget up front because we didn't really know what we were getting into exactly. We were sort of figuring it out as we went along, and as we went along, we were like, oh, like, let's scan the negatives. Okay. And that just became a whole nother aspect of the budget that wasn't planned ahead, or, you know, just different every phase of the project sort of just added on to the budget. I mean, now if I were doing it, I could look back at this experience and form a budget for another project much easier, because I sort of knew what I was, I have a history to go from. But at the time, we were just sort of saying to ourselves, whatever it costs. Let's just try to raise a little bit of startup capital and see if people want this, see if people like the idea. And thankfully they did. We exceeded the goal that we set for ourselves, and we were able to use that money mostly to pay for the scanning. It was very expensive.
Of course.
And then after that, we were able to, as I said, use our own money and as well as get those in-kind donations and discounts to sort of help us complete the remaining aspects of the project. But I would say probably, it was all in. Probably around $100,000 to do everything over 2 years. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Because we chose to not take the cheap route. We chose to do everything at the highest quality and make sure that we were, paying people what they were worth. If they weren't offering us some kind of discount, we were, paying our programmer, paying our designer, making sure everybody, making sure everyone felt like they were a part of the team and and that they were valued. And it was
absolutely
a small team, maybe 5 people total working together.
There again, yeah, I mean, I have to just add this. I mean, forgive me for intruding, but there again, you guys are doing it the way that Stanley. I mean, small crew, and make everyone feel valued. I mean, give them multiple jobs, responsibilities, and there's an old saying that all work is honorable work. Yeah. And like for instance, in a restaurant environment, like it can be argued that the most important person in the restaurant, the most important job is the dishwasher, right? Because if he or she does not keep clean plates coming to chef doesn't have plates to serve the entrees, and the servers and the bartenders, won't get gratuities, and ergo there's another correlation with the way you guys so admirably and with humility just kind of like took it forward with big hopes and a small crew. And I just think that's awesome because it reflects very much something that Stanley would, dare I say, approve of, and he would have done himself. He did do himself.
Right.
Was there a one thing that you recall was like most challenging about making the app, Adam?
I think it came in the end. It was the getting the programming right so that everything just worked properly. I mean, that's the one added. Like, I've worked on documentaries, I've produced documentaries, and the early stages are the same. You're collecting assets, whether they're interviews or photos or audio or whatever you're getting everything together, then you're editing it all together to make a film, right, for a documentary. But here we have this added component of things had to work. Things had to, if you touch something, it had to do something a certain way. You had to make sure all the functionality worked on different size iPad screens, different resolutions. And that became, I think, the most challenging thing that at towards the end of the production,
right,
we were kind of, really frustrated about. The guys were great. They did everything right. It's just that we had to do a ton of beta testing before we could actually put this out and make it available. I think that would be the. And plus, I'm not a programmer, so I couldn't. Everything else I could help and I could be a part of myself, from recording to scanning. I mean, I know enough of all the stuff, even though I had people helping us I was working with them very intimately and helping the programming side to it. I'm not a programmer, so I had to rely solely on the guy doing that. And if he was hitting roadblocks because he had never done something like this before, then I wasn't able to. I just had to wait until he figured out a solution. I had to wait until he had the time to research it or talk to other developers and find out why it wasn't working or how to fix it.
Well, I mean, look, we all get the gifts that we get and often covet the ones we don't have. But there's obviously a reason. I mean, I know how you feel about, like, you know, the gap between not being a programmer, but, you know, hats off to you, man, for doing everything else. I mean, I can't even imagine how much time you spent scanning those negatives and with the sole purpose of getting it right, just getting everything.
Yeah. And one thing,
perfect.
And one thing I didn't even mention is we also, in our searches for those negatives, found old scrapbooks that Matthew's wife had kept, which had old newspaper clippings and Polaroids and just other kind of memorabilia from that time. So we were able to scan those items too and incorporate them into the app experience. So that adds another level of interest to, because it sort of takes you back to that period in time, you know, whether it's a magazine cover or whether it's a clipping of a review of Full Metal Jacket or the original premiere ticket, you know, that Matthew saved from of the film in New York City in 1987. Like all those things we were able to sort of incorporate in some way into the kind of, as I said, appumentary.
In the credits for the app, you know, you'd given, of course, special thanks to you and Matthew gave thanks to other cast members, Tim Colseri, Kevin Major Howard, and then, of course, the FMJ production guys, of course, Leon Vitali, whose new documentary Film Worker is making the rounds in the film circuit and is supposed to be amazing. I cannot wait to see it. And, of course, Jan Harlan.
Mm-hmm.
And so just got to ask, you know, what were their contributions to the project?
Yeah.
Can you share that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Tim was, he was, as I mentioned earlier, we did do this interview with him where he sort of told his side of the story of how he lost the part to Lee Ermey. We still have this interview and we haven't done anything with it. We just couldn't figure out quite how to incorporate it in the way we wanted. So, but if you see Film Worker, he's also interviewed for that movie. He kind of tells the story there as well. So when you see Film Worker, you'll learn that's the Rauschman effect, is that if you hear, so Matthew's perspective from his diary is one point of view that he sort of was witnessing and hearing from other people. And of course, Leon Vitali has his side of the story, but then Arlie Ermey has his own story, which he tells in Film Worker, and Tim Colseri has his version. So, you know,
right.
They all might have a little bit of truth to them and a little bit of
Rashomon effect.
Right,
I love
exactly.
It. Love it.
So that was because he did agree to do this interview. We just haven't, and unfortunately haven't yet found a place to put that interview that we felt. We just didn't want it to be this like one interview by itself on the app. We wanted to have more, and we just haven't gotten around to getting other cast or crew members on camera. So it's still something we would like to do, and we may still do it at a later date. But as we got wrapped up in other projects, it just kind of became a back burner project that we haven't really had the time to focus on. But,
yeah.
But that's him. Kevin Major Howard sent us some photos that he took. He just had a handful, but they were good, and they are inside the app. And I think if you click on the info button on every photo, we did a pretty good job of telling you who gets the photo credit, whether this was of Matthew's or if it was one of Kevin's or one of Tony Hayes's or somebody else's. So that was Kevin. So Leon Vitali, though, of course, Matthew and Leon really got to know each other on the set over those 2 years. They spent a lot of time together. So Matthew and Leon have remained friends, much like when Matthew and I met through Apple. We've remained friends. Matthew tends to be a very, friendly but also loyal person. So if he connects with someone, he stays in touch with them.
And would you want it any other way? I mean,
right? No, it's perfect.
Was Stanley himself not that exact way?
Yes, he was. Yeah, he surrounded himself with the people he felt he could trust, because he wasn't the most trusting. So if he felt somebody was loyal and would be trustworthy, he wanted them around him, and that was Leon, without a doubt.
Yeah. So when you guys put together the app, for instance, you were clearly doing it, because it's the same thing with the podcast. Like, it's a lot of work, but would you bother doing it if it wasn't also really fun?
Yeah, it's fun, it's rewarding, and we're passionate about it. We never really thought to ourselves, oh, we're going to make a ton of money off of this or anything. It was really just we wanted to create something, and something that we thought would be fun and cool to experience. And I think that's how anything worth making has to.
Oh yeah,
you have to want to make it. A lot of filmmakers say you got to make films that you want to see. If you try to make something someone else wants to see, you're not going to be successful.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of how we looked at it. We wanted to make an app that we really thought in our heads we would love, and we had this idea, and we just were trying to figure out how to do it.
Yeah,
but,
and
I think you have to sort of say to yourself, if I would like this, and I am like a lot of other people, then hopefully they'll like it too, and they'll appreciate it. And that's, I think that's the only way you can do it. You have to make something that you are passionate about making, and do it for the art, not for the money. Money can be a reward potentially if it's successful, but the reward should first and foremost be the journey, the process.
Exactly.
And it is, and it was for us, definitely.
You guys, I mean, talk about a labor of love. 2 years and that budget. You guys showed tremendous resiliency, and at a time when nobody knew this was coming. And now It's this established, amazing thing. It's a killer app.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
By Wiki's definition, you guys are killing it on top of the game of killing it. You know what I mean?
Thank you. I appreciate
it. And you guys were doing this at a time when, iPad, what's that? Or, even when they started to, roll out, and they were cost prohibitive to many.
Right.
Who wanted one.
Right. And that was one of the other challenges, is that we early on set out to first and foremost make it for the iPad. And we actually were able to, through some, connections that I had, sort of do an exclusive with Apple, where if we developed this exclusively for Apple, that they would give us some, much needed promotion through the iTunes store. And we kind of made that arrangement, which is one of the reasons why we've never ported it over to Android, but also just the cost involved in doing that was something that we didn't want to have to undertake, another. But we did decide that one thing we could do to reach the non-iPad owners out there was take the audio experience and create an audiobook version, which pretty much anybody can listen to on any device, any computer, phone, or whatever it might be. And so we took the audio that we had recorded and mixed for the app, and we sort of remastered it. We did some new sound effects. We corrected some things. It was fantastic. It took a long time by itself, and but we were able to kind of do some really cool panning effects and just really make the listening experience very, very immersive.
Observational diary. Subject, playing versus being. Date, October 1985. Location, Beckton Gasworks.
I walk around and try to find out where everyone is. I go to the temporary production office and am told that Stanley is looking at dailies. I walk back toward Trailerland and decide not to. I know what the conversations there will be and would prefer not to participate in a bunch of negative bullshit. I decide to explore the buildings that have been blown up and knocked down. Beckton is a big, dead place. It's so creepy. I get away from the buildings and go for a walk in a field of waist-high grass. I'm trying to think about Joker, trying to imagine myself in his shoes. I see Stanley driving by in an army jeep. I think about hiding, lying down in the tall grass, but it's too late. He's turning and driving toward me. Kubrick.
What are you doing?
Modine. Just walking around, thinking. I don't know why, but I'm suddenly emotional. I try my best to hide it from him. Kubrick.
Thinking about what?
Modine. I don't know. I just feel... I don't know. It's stupid. Kubrick.
What?
Modine. I don't know. I just feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I don't know how to play Joker. Kubrick.
I don't want you to play anything. I just want you to be yourself.
There is an awkward pause. I don't know how to respond to that. How do you play yourself? Kubrick.
You want to ride to the set?
Modine. No, I'll walk. He drives off, and I think about what he said. The important part was his choice of words, how he interpreted my situation. There's a tremendous difference between play and be.
We wanted this to feel like you're in Matthew's head and hearing what he's hearing and experiencing what he's experiencing with sound effects and with some original music, but nothing too over the top, just kind of these pads, these kind of musical pads that kind of just create a tone or a feeling of dread or forebodingness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, compared to other audiobooks, I mean, this one is clearly produced more like a radio play, and
right.
I've always been, since childhood, a big fan of what they used to call theater of the mind, and I had old Orson Welles records that I played on my record player, listening to his old radio plays and stuff, and you guys do an incredible job with that by adding all the music and sound effects. And the filters on different voices.
Right.
It really does distinguish it as an audiobook apart from so many others.
Right.
Did you make any, do you recall making changes to the audio other than the translation from the app to the audiobook? Is there anything just additional you would like to share about
I mean, like I said, we did sort of remaster it, and we went through the entire thing and just kind of made sure it had, there were little mistakes and things that after the app had come out, we had realized, we noticed some little things that probably most people wouldn't hear.
Yeah.
But, we corrected them, and Matthew re-recorded a few of the voices that he felt he didn't kind of love the performance, like any actor, trying to perfect their craft. And so we just did little tweaks here and there and made it just a little more cinematic sounding because there wasn't any visual aids to go along with it. We wanted the listening experience just to be that much more immersive.
Theater of the mind.
Yeah, cool. Exactly. So it turned out really well. And, we had a very limited edition CD printing, just 2,000 copies, just because most people, first of all, it takes 4 CDs to put this, entire thing on CD.
Yep.
And then just fewer and fewer people are buying CDs. But we did want to not miss out, because we've heard from a lot of fans and a lot of fans of the film who, especially veterans who are now in their 60s or 70s, they're not downloading audiobooks from Amazon or iTunes or Audible. They still listen to CDs or in their cars. So we wanted to at least have an option for those, a little bit older fans to be able to get it as well. But most people are getting it through Audible, iTunes, Amazon, one of these digital platforms.
Well, it's an absolutely brilliant decision because, again, it's an all of the above approach.
Right.
You're granting access to, all that is great about the Full Metal Jacket Diary, as an app, as a hardcover book, as you say, coffee table, family heirloom type of, and an audiobook. And I mean, it's just, why wouldn't you do it that way? I think you guys made absolutely a brilliant decision. You guys just, it's not just a home run. It's like grand slam, bottom of the ninth, two outs, bases loaded, down by a run.
Well, thank you.
It's the truth, man.
And for people like you, we decided, well, if we're going to do the CD, let's make it a sort of fun collector's item as well. So we did produce I think 24-page little booklet that goes inside, which has some of the best photographs. We also added new forwards by Matthew. We also got Leon Vitali to write a forward and Vivian Kubrick to write a forward. So we tried to make something that, again, if you owned the book and you owned the app, this was yet again another thing you could buy and get something new out of. That it wasn't just a repackaging of the same content that we were offering, a little something new for the ultimate collector to feel like they had, give them an incentive to make that purchase. But yeah, the CDs are pretty much gone from every online site. I have, in my office, maybe 50 sets left, which sometimes we'll bring to events or screenings and do giveaways. The 30th anniversary of Full Metal Jacket, of course, was in June. Right. And so Matthew did a couple screening events at like the Alamo Draft House.
Yep.
And we brought some with us, and we did an event for the Purple Heart Foundation, which is a military charity which helps wounded veterans.
Of course, yeah.
So we gave a bunch of signed copies out to some of those vets. So it's good to have we have a little stash of them left, because some people do like those physical things that then Matthew can sign for them. Unfortunately, you can't sign a digital download or an app. So,
right.
Sometimes it's nice to have the physical media.
Well, it's also, I want to kind of close out by just pointing out how really wonderful it is of Matthew to be continuously carrying the torch, and just for all the right reasons, from the heart, and the way he, I've been to Alamo Draft House, many times for events. Most recently, I was there with Mark Lentz a couple months ago at the one in Yonkers, and we caught Barry Lyndon. For Matthew to just be so engaged at the grassroots level, so to speak, with these events, and to show up for Q&As, and just to be so forthcoming about his experiences and his memories of them, as I'm sure they've only enriched over time. Tends to happen to us as we get older.
Right.
I'm not removed from that equation myself anymore. So yeah, and then for you guys to become friends, in an Apple store, where you're working,
Yep.
And it's just, I personally will never get tired of those "you can't make this stuff up" kind of stories.
Yeah, Matthew was at my wedding. We are just like, our families, my wife and my daughter, we're all friendly with his wife and his kids. Like
Right on.
Just like with Kubrick, he, like with Leon Vitali and his family, again, if you see Filmworker, you'll really get a sense of that dynamic. But they were just inseparable in many ways. They spent all their time together.
Yeah.
And the families as well. And I think when people have a real relationship like that, it does go beyond just the office, so to speak. It becomes a real family affair.
I want to ask, have you had the chance to read Stanley Kubrick and Me, which is co-authored by Filippo Oliveri and Stanley's personal driver, Emilio D'Alessandro? He lives in Cassino, Italy now.
I know about it. Yeah, I haven't read it yet. I have a copy. It's one of my many things I need to do, one of my many to read books. But we have a photo that's in the app of Matthew with him on.
I know. It's a great photo.
Yeah, he talks about him in his diary. This Italian man comes to pick him up, and
I know, it's a great
drives him out to his estate. So it's an interesting. Yeah, there's so many people that worked with him that have their story to tell, and I try to consume as much of it, of those things as I can. I'm just a little.
I hear you. I hear you, man. We all have so many things going on, so many burners at the same time. I have never been busier at any time in my life than I am these days, but I also couldn't be happier, and dare I say, feel more blessed to be so busy. And yet, yes, I'm constantly getting new information and and books and publications and all things related to Kubrick,
right,
and his universe, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it can, I think I got a pretty good brain for multitasking, and even still, it can be difficult to keep up with so much. But that is also a testament to, the fact that, we lost him almost 20 years ago, and it's not the case where he was a person who became bigger in death than in life. He was gigantic in life.
Oh yeah.
And now 20 years almost, 19 years after his passing almost, we are seeing only more and more discussion, publications, information coming to light, and I really like that I can't keep up with every last printed word or audio interview, but I do my damnedest. I know we all do, because again, labor of love, but it's fun, and yet I still feel like oh God, if only there was some way to just like have more in my out basket than my in basket, just for once, man.
Yeah. Well, no, there's just too much out there. But I do recommend Filmworker, without a doubt. You will love. It's making the rounds, and I don't know what their distribution plan is as yet. But I did, I helped a little bit on I provided them with some photographs, and as I was saying earlier, I keep getting photos from people that worked on the set. I continue to. So I tried to help them out a little bit and just look for any photo that had Leon Vitali in it, either taken by Matthew or by any of these other people, and and get those to them, because they were they needed as much as they could get. He wasn't being photographed that often,
right?
So the photos were a really important part of the story. So they were nice enough to give me a credit and thank me, and so I was glad to do my little part. They also include some audio clips from the audiobook, which is great. From when Matthew talks about Leon in his diary, they play those in the film, and Matthew also has we set up a new interview for him as well.
No, I mean, really, you were integral, and you've given a resounding yes to Filmworker, and I know that Mark Lentz was at the premiere, and then the next night at the New York Film Festival, and got to meet Leon and participate in the Q&A, and he's just been raving about the film as well. So I have to just make one recommendation for you, since we're both here in the New York area. Obviously, the Netflix streaming is different depending on the region, but here in the U.S., if you have Netflix, you can watch the documentary that was based on Filippo and Emilio's book, and it's called S is for Stanley. And
okay.
It's you got to watch it, man. It's
I
like
will,
a love story. It's like watching it's just achingly beautiful, and I mean that in the least sappy way. It's just done with a very loving brush stroke, so to speak.
Right.
And it really tells the story of, like you were describing, Leon's closeness with Stanley, and Stanley's affinity, his loyalty, and it really comes across in the documentary. And Filippo co-wrote the screenplay as well. So yeah, definitely check that out. It's about 90 minutes, but essential viewing. One of those things when somebody had posted in Scast that it would be dropping on Netflix soon, and it was one of those things where I was like, no Facebook, for a couple hours tonight. Turning off the lights. Yeah. I mean, the night they added it, I watched it back to back, and
that's great.
Basically, went to bed crying.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna
happy tears. You'll be glad, man. It's really just, I mean, all that and a bag of chips.
Nice.
As they say. Cool. When the podcast goes up, we're gonna link to the Full Metal Jacket Diary app. I'm wondering if there's anything else you want to mention.
With the app, I would just say that the app originally went up in 2012 for $14.99. We then dropped it to $9.99. And for the 30th anniversary of Full Metal Jacket this year, it's only $1.99. So it is like,
get out of here.
We just want everyone that has an iPad that likes Kubrick or the film or Matthew, or just likes a cool story, like even like acting students or film students.
Yes,
this is like a great tool for them. So we just want anyone that might be interested to have access to it. So $1.99. And if you're still not sure about spending those $2, we actually have the first chapter app, a separate app. It's like a preview version that's free. So you can actually download the full first chapter app. It does everything that the full app does, but it just doesn't, it locks you out of the other chapters. And if they don't have the iPad, the audiobook is available. As I said, if you have an Audible subscription, I believe it's free.
Yep.
And if you don't have an Audible subscription, I think it's $9.99 from Amazon and iTunes to download the MP3 version. Again, $9.99 for just the audio, whereas the app gives you everything.
I know, it's amazing. Please get it. I mean, this is another thing that was done clearly with love and respect by Adam Rackoff and Matthew Modine, and it absolutely deserves to be widespread and just basically enjoyed by everyone, So please pick it up. And
tell
us more, man. Go on.
One more thing. Well, two more things. Quick things. The as I mentioned, we do have the CD sets in our possession, a small number. If someone just can't, if that's the only way you can consume it, if you hit me up on Twitter at FMJ Diary, that's our Twitter handle. FMJDIARY, and let us know that you really would like to order a CD set. I can work with you. You can make a donation to our project, and if you buy one, the money will go towards future updates to the app, because we have to pay our programmer every time we do any little tweaking. So it would just be reinvested into the Full Metal Jacket experience. So
awesome.
Feel free to reach out about that. And also, I'd like to, for your Facebook page and fans, I'd like to donate a print, one of Matthew's prints.
Oh, come on.
That is signed from the set of Full Metal Jacket. So if you'd like to do a raffle or a giveaway, you decide the best way to get your listeners to. I don't know what kind of system you have set up to.
Well, I'm gonna defer to Steven and let him, figure that out.
So yeah, if you give me the
winning
address, I will mail it to them, and they will be the owner of a limited edition fine art print of one of Matthew's photos taken on the set.
Okay, go for it now. Yeah. That was a nice conversation there with the producer Adam Rackoff and our very own Jason Furlong. We spoke to Adam on the 9th of October 2017. Don't forget to check out Adam and Matthew's Full Metal Jacket Diary app, which is available wherever you buy your apps. Also the Full Metal Jacket Diary Audiobook, available wherever you buy audiobooks. Both come highly recommended by the team at Scars. I'd like to thank Adam for that very generous offer of the Full Metal Jacket limited edition fine art print signed by Matthew Modine, and also for allowing us to use a few audio clips from the audiobook. I'll post details of how to get your hands on that brilliant prize at Scars on Facebook. And of course, check out the Kubrick film Full Metal Jacket if you haven't already seen it. Well, thanks to Mark Lentz, who again provided invaluable research for this episode, and also introduced us to Adam and helped us set up the interview. Thanks, Mark. What a lovely chap. Okay. Yeah. Thanks to Alexis from Montclair for telling us who is Stanley Kubrick. And of course, thanks to our marvellous host, Jason Furlong. Bring it closer. Thanks to James and Jason and myself for keeping the Stanley Kubrick Appreciation Society on Facebook running smoothly. We've got some recent shenanigans. Please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts and let us know what you think about the show. Next episode, we will be chatting. Good joking. I'm now going to leave you with a great Phil Spector produced track from the Full Metal Jacket soundtrack, Chapel of Love by the Dixie Cups. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Kubrick's Universe, and thanks for listening. I'm Stephen Rich.
Going to the chapel and we're gonna get married.
That was really great. Thank you, Adam. Brilliant.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope it wasn't too long. I realize I may have rambled on.
No.
I think if anybody rambled on and he's going to get edited out, that'll be Mr. Furlong.
No, it's Steven. What are you talking about? God, I'm sure there's a bunch of people I've crossed paths with who are like, okay, 5 minutes of that guy is 6 minutes too many.
Yeah, like me. I feel that way.
No, screw you. You're the best.
We have taken very thorough precautions in this podcast against broadcasting anything which might only be attributed to human error.
These guys aren't scientists. They're making it up as they go along.
It's Kubrick's universe. We just live in it.
Thank you for listening to the Stanley Kubrick Podcast. Come back soon.